My name is Olivia. I'm 28, and I make a living tracing other people's money. As a forensic accountant in a glass office tower downtown, I spend my days following numbers, catching liars, and proving what really happened when money mysteriously disappears. But somehow, in my own family, I've become the thief. 2 nights ago, my brother pointed at me in the middle of our parents' living room and said I stole the cash he'd saved for his wedding. In one sentence, he turned me from the responsible one into the villain, and everyone was far too ready to believe him. One moment I was helping count the envelopes for the wedding, the next moment he was holding up an empty lockbox, eyes blazing, shouting that I was the last one who touched it. My parents stared at me like they'd never seen me before. My aunt clutched her pearls. Someone actually gasped, and the room tilted. That night, when I finally fell asleep on my apartment couch after being told to leave before you ruin anything else, my brain replayed an old nightmare. I was 8 again at a birthday party that wasn't mine, holding a prize I'd actually earned, only to have it yanked away because he deserves it more. He's the special one. I woke up with the same hollow feeling in my chest. Tell me, have you ever felt completely invisible in your own family? Until they need someone to blame? 2 days later, the whole family would gather for a big pre-wedding dinner, pretending everything was fine. They didn't know I was coming. They definitely didn't know I'd walk in with video proof that would blow up their perfect narrative. Before I show you exactly how that dinner went down, and what the video exposed, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I want to see how far this family drama travels before my brother's lies finally catch up to him. The accusation started like a bad joke that went way too far, the kind that stops being funny halfway through but everyone keeps watching anyway. My brother's name is Ryan, and in my family's narrative, he's the golden boy. Charming, under pressure, always one step away from greatness if only the world would stop being so unfair to him. That night, he slammed the metal lockbox down on my parents' dining table so hard the glasses rattled. "The wedding cash is gone," he shouted, breathing hard, face flushed. And she was the last one in the study. Every head turned toward me like we were all following stage directions. My mom, Anna, went pale and pressed her fingers to her lips. My dad, Michael, folded his arms across his chest in that way that meant, "I've already made up my mind." My aunt leaned closer like this was prime-time entertainment. "Tell us the truth, Olivia," Dad said quietly, which somehow felt worse than if he'd yelled. "Did you take it?" My throat went dry. My brain didn't just freeze. It fractured and started running 3 different scripts at once, like a glitchy video game. If I defend myself too loudly, I'll sound guilty and dramatic. If I stay calm, they'll say I'm cold and calculating. If I mention my job chasing thieves, they'll accuse me of being too obsessed with money. If I question Ryan, they'll say I'm jealous of his big day. I finally managed. I didn't take a cent. Why would I steal from my own brother's wedding? Ryan's fiancée, Chloe, flinched like I'd insulted her. "Because you've hated this wedding from day one," she snapped. "You said it was too much. Maybe this was your way of proving it." Mom stepped between us like a shaky referee. "Enough. This is not helping anyone. Until this is sorted, I think it's best if you take a step back, Olivia. Maybe don't come to the wedding events. We can't have more drama." The sentence landed like a punch wrapped in politeness. Within minutes, I watched my phone light up. Removed from the wedding group chat. My name erased from the seating chart spreadsheet. A text from a cousin saying, "I hope this is a misunderstanding, but you really put everyone in a bad spot." In the corner of the room, I heard someone mutter, "I always felt like she was different." As if different naturally translated to thief. Have you ever stood in front of people who claim to know you best and realize they're more invested in a convenient story about you than in asking a single real question? I cried exactly once, alone, in my car, in the dark driveway. Then something snapped back into place. The girl they'd just kicked out was their version of me. The woman who went to work every day and untangled messy financial lies was still very much alive. If there's one thing I know professionally, it's this. Money doesn't move by magic. It always leaves fingerprints. The first person I called was my coworker and closest friend, Daniel, a cybersecurity specialist who'd seen me take apart corporate fraud schemes, uglier than this family mess. I put him on speaker, hands still shaking. "They picked the wrong sister to frame," he said after I unloaded everything. "Okay, forensic mode on. Walk me through it. Where was the lockbox? Who had keys? What security system does your dad use?" We turned my humiliation into a case file. I opened a new note on my phone titled "Wedding Theft Personal" and started filling it like any other investigation. Our messages became a chaotic but focused thread, a text montage version of a crime board. Me. Lockbox kept in parents' home office. Only Dad and Ryan officially have keys. I was in there earlier helping count envelopes. Daniel. Any cameras inside the room? Me. No cams in office. Privacy. But there's a hallway cam since last year's break-in. Direct line of sight to the office door. Daniel. Bingo. Does your dad even know how to pull footage? Most people never check. Me. He probably thinks the cloud is a weather report. Daniel. Then you need access. Camera brand? App name? I'll walk you through. The next morning, I drove back to my parents' house pretending I'd come for my forgotten jacket. My mom fussed with coffee, acting like nothing had happened, like I hadn't been temporarily exiled from my own brother's life. I slipped down the hallway toward the office. The tiny black camera above the office door stared down at me like an impartial witness. For a second, I just stood there under its unblinking eye and thought, "You saw what really happened, didn't you?" Dad caught me as I was turning away. "Still looking for angles, Olivia?" he asked, folding his arms again. "Ways to blame someone else?" I swallowed the rising anger. "No, I'm looking for the truth. If I stole the money, that camera will show it. If I didn't, it'll show that too. Don't you want to be sure?" He hesitated, that crack of doubt flickering across his face before pride tried to plaster over it. "The system uploads to some cloud thing," he muttered. "I don't know how to get to it." "I do," I said. On the drive home, Daniel and I wrestled with login pages, two-factor codes sent to my dad's phone, and a password reset that revealed my father still thought Restaurant 123 was a secure choice. Every minute, while we waited for verification codes to arrive and files to load, the same question gnawed at me. When the people you love decide you're guilty before checking any facts, what does family actually mean? The family dinner was scheduled for 2 days after the accusation at my parents' small Italian restaurant, the place Ryan was destined to inherit someday, according to every relative who'd ever ruffled his hair and called him the future of this family. All afternoon, my social media turned into a split screen of my life. On one side, carefully curated joy. On the other, raw damage control. On Instagram, Ryan posted a boomerang of clinking wine glasses with the caption, "Family time before the big day," and a heart emoji. Chloe shared a close-up of her engagement ring resting on a folded napkin, tagged at the restaurant, comments flooding in. "So happy for you both. You deserve all the happiness." I watched those posts with the sound off like they were a show I hadn't been invited to be in, only blamed for ruining. At the same time, my messages with Daniel looked like the behind-the-scenes footage no one knew existed. Daniel got into the camera cloud account. The archive is a mess, but I found motion clips from the hallway. Me. Night of the theft? Daniel. Yep. There's a clip at 11:47 p.m. You're already home, right? Me. I left before 10. I have rideshare receipts to prove it. Daniel, then you're going to want to see this. He sent the file. I opened it with my heart in my throat. Grainy footage. Timestamp in the corner. 23:47. The hallway outside the office. Then, clear as daylight, Ryan walking up alone, pulling a key from his pocket, unlocking the door, and stepping inside. The next clip, 11:59 p.m. Him emerging, holding the lockbox against his chest. No one else in sight. No one pushing him. No one stealing from him. Just him. There's more, Daniel added on a call. I checked your dad's and Ryan's banking apps using the same password reset trick. Don't get mad, I did it clean. Two-factor, logs, everything. The morning after that footage, Ryan deposits almost the exact amount of the missing cash into his personal account, then sends multiple payments to an online betting platform. Same day. I felt my stomach drop and solidify at the same time. While they were rehearsing vows and cake cutting, he was gambling with money people had gifted in good faith. We downloaded the clip and the screen recordings, labeled everything, duplicated it onto a USB stick in my phone. I even emailed a copy to myself so it lived in an inbox he couldn't touch. Parallel reality played in my head. In one, I did nothing. Stayed blocked from the group chat. Watched the wedding photos appear with me edited out in advance. In the other, I walked into that dinner with the truth and let their golden boy's halo crack on its own. Mom called once that afternoon. If you've calmed down, she said, using that tone that made it sound like I was throwing a tantrum, you can always come over quietly and talk. Maybe apologize for how you reacted. We don't need the whole family knowing about this ugly situation. I stared at the paused frame of Ryan carrying the lockbox on my laptop. You're more worried about people knowing what he did than about what he actually did, I said. She didn't answer that. When the people closest to you care more about protecting an image than protecting you, what exactly are you supposed to owe them? Your silence? Or the kind of truth they can't spin their way out of? I showed up to the family dinner unannounced, the little bell over the restaurant door chiming like a starting gun. Warm light, clinking plates, the smell of tomato sauce and garlic. Everything screamed comfort. But the minute I stepped inside, the air shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. A cousin froze with a breadstick halfway to his mouth. Ryan sat at the center table in a crisp white shirt, laughing at some story he was telling. His smile slipped the second his eyes met mine. You weren't invited, he said, voice tight, his chair scraping back slightly. Tonight is for family. I walked closer, pulse steady in a way it hadn't been in days. Good, I said. Then I'm exactly where I need to be. Dad half rose from his seat, torn between avoiding a scene and enforcing the exile he'd helped create. Olivia, this isn't the time, he hissed. We have guests. I gestured toward the room. Those guests deserve to know who they're toasting. Daniel slipped in behind me, calm in a plain shirt and jeans, carrying a small case. He moved toward the TV mounted on the wall like he'd just been hired as tech support. What are you doing? Mom whispered. Don't turn this into a spectacle. I pulled my phone from my bag and placed it on the nearest table, angling the screen up. 2 nights ago, you all decided I was a thief based on one person's word. No questions, no evidence, just vibes and a lot of history about who's the favorite and who's the difficult one. I brought something a bit stronger than vibes. Daniel gave me a subtle nod. TV connected, streaming stick ready. I tapped the file and cast it to the screen. The restaurant's chatter vanished, replaced by the soft hum of the fridge and the clink of a glass somewhere in the back. The hallway footage appeared. Timestamp, fuzzy frame, then Ryan stepping into view. He walked up to the office door, pulled out a key, unlocked it, and slipped inside. Another clip, him exiting 12 minutes later, cradling the lockbox like it was the most normal thing in the world. I didn't narrate. I let the silence do the talking. Chloe's hand slid off his arm. Ryan, she whispered, eyes wide. That's the night the money went missing. This doesn't prove anything, he snapped, face flushing red. I was just checking the money, making sure it was secure. A murmur rolled through the room. I swiped to the next video. A screen recording of a banking app, the account name blurred for privacy, but the timing and amounts painfully clear. A large cash deposit the morning after the footage. Multiple payments to an online betting site throughout the day. Daniel had zoomed in on the transaction descriptions so they were unmistakable. You didn't lose the wedding money, I said evenly, my voice carrying over the room. You moved it. You loaded it into your own account and gambled it. And instead of admitting that, you pointed at me and let everyone tear me apart for you. Ryan's jaw clenched. You hacked my account? I followed the money, I replied. It's what I do every day. You just never thought I'd use my skills on you. I let my gaze sweep across the tables. Relatives who'd avoided meeting my eyes 2 days ago now staring at the screen, at Ryan, at me. Some looked ashamed, some looked furious. Some just looked thrilled to be witnessing drama. Be honest, if you were in my place and you had this kind of proof against the brother who sold you out without blinking, would you quietly protect his reputation or hit play in front of everyone and finally make them see who he really is? The explosion didn't come all at once. It rolled through the room in ugly, unstoppable waves. First came disbelief. That can't be right, my mom whispered, staring at the TV like sheer willpower could pixelate the footage into something else. Her hand hovered over her mouth, eyes darting between the screen and Ryan as if there had to be some version of this where he was still the victim and I was still the problem. Then came anger. From everyone, at everyone, ricocheting off the walls. You lied to us, my dad said to Ryan, his voice low and more dangerous than I'd heard it in years. He pointed a finger at the screen, at the banking transactions, at the betting site logos. You let us throw your sister out of this family over something you did, while you knew exactly where that money went. The relatives who had muttered about me 2 nights before suddenly found the floor very interesting. Ryan stood up so fast his chair tipped back. His hands were shaking and his voice cracked between defensiveness and panic. You don't understand, he insisted, looking wildly around as if someone was going to jump in with a script that saved him. I was going to win it back. I just needed a little time. The bets were supposed to cover the honeymoon, the upgrades, the venue fee. We're under so much pressure. Everything's expensive. At my expense? I cut in, the words sharper than I'd planned. Years of swallowed comments lined up behind that one sentence. At the expense of my name, my job, my dignity. Do you know what it feels like to be treated as the family's built-in scapegoat? Every time something goes wrong, it's, Olivia's too intense. Olivia's jealous. Olivia doesn't understand. You knew exactly what would happen if you pointed at me. You knew they'd believe you. Conversations and memories I'd buried came back like a highlight reel I hadn't asked for. The time I got grounded for ruining Ryan's birthday, when it was actually his friends who broke the TV. The time money went missing from Mom's wallet and everyone stared at me because I was secretive as a teenager. The way relatives always turned to him at parties and to me when they needed someone to blame. Daniel stayed a step behind my shoulder, silent but solid, like a reminder that at least one person in this room trusted facts more than family myths. I was panicking, Ryan said, his eyes darting between Chloe, my parents, the screen. If the wedding looked cheap, everyone would judge us. I just needed one big win, that's all. I didn't think it would go this far. You didn't think at all? Chloe shot back, her voice trembling. She yanked her hand away from his. You told me your account was hacked, that some scam wiped you out. You let me look your sister in the eye and call her a thief for you. The room buzzed with low voices, relatives whispering, trying to recalibrate their version of events without looking too wrong. Mom finally turned to me, her face crumpled. "Why didn't you just come talk to us instead of this?" She gestured weakly at the screen. "We could have handled it privately." I actually laughed, a short, humorless sound. "I did talk to you. 2 nights ago, when I walked out of this house and told you I didn't take a cent. You chose the story that made you feel less uncomfortable. You wanted this kept quiet so your image stayed intact, not because you cared about the truth." A heavy silence followed. Someone coughed. A younger cousin looked at me with wide eyes like he was seeing me for the first time. "Is this true?" Dad asked, turning back to Ryan, but his tone had changed. It wasn't the indulgent, excuse-ready voice he usually used with him. It was the voice he used on dishonest employees at the restaurant. Ryan's shoulders sagged. For a second, all the arrogance drained out of him, leaving just a scared man who'd finally run out of lies. "Yes," he said hoarsely. "I took it. I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed. And then it spiraled. The bets kept losing. When the money was gone, I panicked and—" He glanced at me, couldn't finish. "And you sacrificed your sister," Dad finished for him. Again. The word hung there. Again. Not an accident. Not the first time. That, more than anything, made my chest hurt. This wasn't just about one night. It was about a pattern everyone had been willing to live with, as long as it didn't get projected onto a giant TV in the middle of dinner. "Do you have any idea?" I said quietly, my voice suddenly steadier than I felt. "What it's like to grow up knowing that if something went wrong, odds were good it would land on you? That you would be the one asked to be the bigger person, to understand, to let it go, because he was under stress, because he was emotional, because he was the future of the family business?" A few relatives shifted in their seats. One aunt looked away, guilty. She'd been the one who used to say, "Ryan's a boy. You know how they are. Olivia's strong. She can take it." "No more," I said, more to myself than to them. "You don't get to light me on fire to keep everyone warm and then call it family." When the mask finally cracks and the person everyone worships is exposed in front of the entire room, do you feel satisfied, or does it sting to realize how cheaply your trust was sold in the first place? And if you were me, would you stay for the rest of that dinner? Or take your power back and walk out on your own terms? In the end, the revenge wasn't about destroying Ryan's life or watching him burn. It was about forcing everyone to stand in the same room as the truth they'd been dodging for years. That night, once the shouting and crying and excuses started to blur together, my dad did something I'd never seen him do with Ryan. He drew a line. "The wedding is postponed," he said, voice flat, leaving no room for negotiation. "Until every cent of that money is paid back and you get real help for this gambling problem. You are off the restaurant accounts effective immediately. I'll handle the finances. You focus on fixing what you broke." Mom opened her mouth, the automatic defense on the tip of her tongue, then shut it again. All she managed was a choked, "This is a nightmare." But for the first time, nightmare included what Ryan had done, not just the possibility of people finding out. Ryan didn't argue. Maybe it was the footage. Maybe it was the look on Chloe's face. Or maybe he'd just finally run out of people to hide behind. Because yes, he apologized. To my parents, to Chloe, to the relatives he'd lied to. But there was a separate apology he owed me, and we both knew it. I didn't stay to watch the entire fallout. I listened just long enough to hear Dad tell everyone that the cash would be reimbursed from the restaurant's savings, and Ryan would pay it back working whatever shifts were needed, even if he had to bus tables instead of managing. The golden boy wasn't golden anymore. He was just a man with a problem and a list of consequences. When he finally came over, eyes red, he looked smaller somehow. "I'm sorry, Olivia," he said, voice raw. I I didn't think it would go this far. I thought you'd be fine. You always land on your feet. That's the problem, I replied. You counted on me being fine. You counted on everyone believing you. My reputation, my job, my relationships. That was all just collateral damage to you. Your life going badly is not my safety net. For once, he had no comeback. I picked up my bag, nodded at Daniel in thanks, and walked out of the restaurant without anyone telling me to leave. This time, I was the one choosing the exit. 1 year later, the wedding finally happened, but it didn't look like the fairy tale they'd been planning. The guest list was smaller, the venue simpler, the decorations less dramatic. There was no showy cash lockbox this time, just discreet digital transfers and a very clear budgeting spreadsheet. Ryan had spent months in therapy for gambling addiction, attending support groups, and working early morning and late night shifts at the restaurant to repay every dollar. He'd gone from talking about big moves and quick wins to obsessing over inventory and margins like every other manager who'd had to grow up the hard way. Before the ceremony, he asked to speak at the rehearsal dinner. I almost skipped it, but curiosity won. Standing at the same restaurant where everything had blown up, he took a deep breath and told the room the story. Our story. He said my name. He admitted, out loud, that he'd framed me because he was more afraid of looking like a failure than of actually becoming one. He said that for years he'd been allowed to believe someone would always clean up after him, and that he'd leaned on that until it cracked. The apology didn't magically glue everything back together, but it put the responsibility where it belonged. On him, not on me. I went to the wedding, but not as the overshadowed sibling hovering at the edge of photos. I went as someone who had drawn a boundary in blood and refused to step back over it. I danced. I smiled. I congratulated them. And I kept my distance emotionally. Trust, once cracked, doesn't reset like a game save. It rebuilds slowly, if at all, and on your terms, not theirs. These days, I see my family regularly, but differently. I don't rush to smooth over tension or volunteer to be the emotional punching bag. When someone starts to twist a story about me into something easier to digest, I stop them. I don't mind being called the blunt one if bluntness is what keeps the lies from growing legs. Because here's the real lesson I took from this. Families don't stay strong by pretending everything is fine and casting one person as the permanent villain. They stay strong when they choose truth over comfort, accountability over image, and respect over blind loyalty. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge you can get is not screaming or ruining someone's life. It's forcing everyone to see you clearly, then living well on your own terms whether they approve or not. So let me ask you this. In your own family, if something went wrong and someone had to take the blame, do you know who they'd look at first? And would you stay quiet to keep the peace, or finally stand up and risk breaking the picture-perfect frame?